Hey everybody, Steve Olson, WSO, and I have special guest Laura Eisenhower. Thank you for joining us tonight, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I'm very excited about this discussion because, first of all, I will just say that I'm a huge fan of your grandfather, General Dwight Eisenhower, who, if people study World War II as much as I've studied World War II, they'll know that he's an American hero, period. No getting around it, okay? But we're going to talk a little bit and probably hopefully open up with some discussion about what happened to him in his presidency and things like that. But before we get to that, though, Laura, give us a little, because a lot of my audience might not know a lot about you, Laura. Why don't you give us just kind of the elevator speech of how you got into this conspiracy world and connect some dots for us on how you got here.
Well, I've always been processing all sorts of things on multiple levels. I really just got hit hard when I was a little kid with what I felt to be a really strong calling or mission. And it was a little bit odd to have it come in so soon or early in my life. But I just became a really strong observer to everything going on around me. The more also I got to know Eisenhower, not so much at first from history books like other people, but as a member of, the family, somebody who I was not able to meet in the flesh, but I did, meet Mamie. I went to the Gettysburg farm and really felt his presence with me all the time, and I couldn't explain it. And there was something that he was trying to show me or just some level of guardianship or support that I was receiving from him throughout my life. But it definitely started in childhood. And so I was just allowing my journey to unfold, and I would kind of connect the dots with things that I was seeing in our world history, but also knowing that there's a huge amount of our history that's covered up. Mm-hmm. That's when I started to go into the conspiracy side of things, because things weren't lining up, and I was being shown, I don't know if the word's shown, but I was feeling into a lot of, other lifetimes, other layers of this reality. So I was seeing things like firsthand. And I was also somewhat being prepared for this particular window period of ascension that we're in now, called the stellar activation cycle. And a lot more was coming to me in regards to that versus like ET government treaties. But to me, everything connects. And to understand one thing is to have to understand something else, or else we're not going to make much progress. So throughout my whole life, I've just been really connecting the dots in regards to off-planet galactic history type things. How we became the planet that we are today, how our DNA has been, compromised, what junk DNA is through the use of, tools like astrology and, our hidden history and connection to ET government treaties and reversal technologies that are trying to, create digression. The list is so long that it would probably not make a whole lot of sense to, list all the different layers. But a lot of it also had to do with like life or death, Part of getting this information was to stay alive, because I was being heavily targeted, and there was an agenda to put me in a different place than I am today. And really, in my life experience, the close enough to the truth is what has set me free. We have the outer stuff, but then we have the internal stuff. So I got that piece of what it means to stay true to myself. My background's in wilderness expedition leadership, so I spent a lot of time in nature after I left the Washington, D.C. area where I went to high school. And I was really able to connect into the earth and really feel into, what's really necessary. And yeah, my studies have taken me all over the place. And one of the big things was when I was finally able to really connect the dots to what happened during his administration and all these different wars that we've seen throughout history, including galactic wars, and how our junk DNA holds these stories and codes of these higher dimensional beings that we actually are, and the things that are trying to sabotage us are really playing on our sense of identity in order to harvest and feed on us to create this system that we call reality. And so that's just been my study, is to kind of crack that and, understand the mechanisms that they use or utilize in order to create this control system, including some really, dark things. It's not just technology. It's not just the propaganda we see in the news. There's a lot about theft and stealing, life force and things related to programs that we don't see or we don't learn about, like secret space programs, and layers upon layers upon layers of hidden things. So to some, a lot of it might be conspiracy, but when you really start to connect the dots, when one thing can validate the other, then it no longer really feels like a theory. Maybe explaining certain things are theoretical, but some things have proven itself to be enough factual for me to actually feel the shift in my own body and my ability to actually navigate this reality from a more empowered place, instead of all this duping and manipulation that we see everywhere.
Yeah, and I concur. I think that's happening to a lot of people right now. I think that some folks, I would call you like early adopter, I guess would be the word. There are people that have been at it longer than others. Let's just put it that way, right? And I've been at this for about 5 years in a serious, really studying conspiracy, really studying what's going on and pulling these things apart. But you've been at it for a lot longer, right? I mean, you've been at this for better than 20 years at least, right?
At least. It's gone through different stages. I would say in my early years, things were really starting to hit me around between the ages of 6 and 8 years old. And it just sort of evolved. Most of it was feeling like I had been thrown off the face of the earth, and just recognizing the programming and recognizing just a lot of the stuff coming through the media, the distortions, the imbalance of the masculine and feminine, the mass sort of duality, and how unreal that felt to me and inauthentic. And then I saw an article about Eisenhower meeting with aliens or extraterrestrials in a weekly world newspaper, which is supposed to be fake news. And then everything kind of opened up, and
So it was a trigger, like actually learning about your grandfather's experience, and then let's go there. Let's talk about it. So Ike was elected president in the early 50s, and there are tons of stories about him meeting with various, there's stories about him meeting with Palladians, Tigetans, all kinds of stuff. Can you kind of just give us a rundown kind of chronologically of what happened with President Eisenhower in his presidency, and as it relates to MK Ultra, as it relates to extraterrestrial contact, things like that?
Yeah, I hope I can articulate this well, because these are not the easiest topics to form sentences and phrases and paragraphs that can be easily assimilated, because there is so much disinformation and there are so many different pieces of information that are out there that don't quite, connect all the dots. But from my research, from what I've understood, by the time he was meeting with beings, that had already happened. I mean, that was already going on. And when we look at the covert, like shadow governments, they're already in alliances from, the times of Atlantis. And, different wars that took place in our earthly history have had everything to do with.
What you're saying is the control structure has had, we think of alliances like we, typically first blush, let's call it level one. We hear about Eisenhower meeting with an ET, and he's supposedly making some kind of a treaty, or they're trying to get him to give up nuclear weapons or whatever the issue is. And what you're saying is that these treaties and these agreements, these alliances with Earth governments go back all the way back to Atlantis.
Well, they're different then, but as far as like the government structure that we see today, a lot of whistleblowers have noted dates like 1926, 1933. And as far as things like the Greada Treaty, that happened in Roosevelt's administration and involved individuals that we don't hear about in regards to ET government treaties. And there's a lot of history there, and it gets, pretty complex, involving, folks like Winston Churchill, Aleister Crowley, and Hitler, and the Nordic involvement, which is what made it so confusing by the time Eisenhower was meeting with ETs and what they were proposing. There was a strong alliance with the Nordics and the Nazis and Hitler's regime. And the confusing part is that there's a lot of different factions. One can't say that, all of this one, race is negative or positive. There are very dangerous, zetas that occupied Nordic bodies in order to run an agenda. And as we see today, we see sort of fake news. We see cover-ups, the war on terror. We see weather events taking place, and a lot of those aren't actually natural. And this is what we've been dealing with in history, is how can you dupe somebody? How can you convince well-intentioned people to go along with your agenda? And that's what I felt like he was dealing with, because first off, he was, from what I've come to hear, and Dr. Solid's research talks about this, Eisenhower felt good about the Nordics and what they were proposing, but nobody else he was around, his advisors, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whoever his, group were the ones that have more jurisdiction over these kind of decisions, we're not in agreement to it. But part of what I tap into sometimes is that they're all sort of connected. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're not going to agree with the Nordics, like let's show up in a different form and get you to feel sorry for us and talk about saving a dying race, because maybe put it in that context, it creates a different reaction. Mm-hmm. Because the whole idea of getting rid of nuclear weapons for a lot of them, even the well-intentioned ones, were what did not seem like a good idea in light of the Cold War and things still, going on, and maybe just an intuitive lack of trust of, this particular race. Who knows what that, what those meetings even look like. So the next round, from what I've come to research and seen enough common threads in, this information in enough places, is that the Greys ended up showing up. Now, the Gray treaties did not originate in Eisenhower's administration, though. So if we see it being carried over from Roosevelt's administration, because supposedly those treaties are renewed every 10 years, was the Nordic offering and proposal a divine intervention to keep this Garada Treaty from continuing on? Or was it coming in the form of the same sort of thing but in a different guise? Because the thing is, the treaty with the Greys was broken. How do we know that the treaties with the Nordics wasn't going to be broken? So a lot of people naturally think that all Nordics are benevolent. And part of the reason is because they're blonde and they blue-eyed and they have that.
Yep. They're beautiful people. Yep. Yeah.
But they have this sort of eugenics kind of like, pure race type thing. And in their eyes, that's not evil. So, the species that is behind the agenda doesn't consider themselves evil. Only the person that's on the other side of it that might be compromised would. So to me, when you stack it all up and you look at it from a larger perspective, these are all different aspects really of ourselves. And one of the most important things is that we switch on our dormant DNA and we figure out a way to work with our galactic heritage and these other beings from a place of a greater understanding of who they are, what they're about. And that's why I don't think a whole lot could happen, back then. Now we're at a crossroads where it's up to the individual to begin to discover truth and to share those ideas with a sense of harmony in our hearts in order to, get down to the truth. So treaties make sense to a certain degree, but then they don't, because what do they need to create a treaty for? They are creating a treaty to give us some kind of technology to then take humans and experiment on them. And these experimentations ended up being out of control. And the whole kind of selling us out to, ETs that are, experimenting on our genetics, all the bartering and use of, humans to go off and do slave work on other planets and all this kind of stuff ended up being the result. And that actually happened before Eisenhower stepped into office. This was just a renewal. But there are factions of the NSA that were involved in these treaties. They always like to create an outer facade so that they can say, oh, it was that leader or this leader. There's so much beyond that is operating behind the scenes that have been working with these beings going back to, times of Atlantis. If we look at Aleister Crowley's history, he has a very strong connection with the Atlantean Dark Lords and the the implementation of a lot of these, false timeline scenarios that we're even seeing play out right now as we speak. So then the beings from Venus came, supposedly Valiant Thor.
Yeah, Valiant Thor.
And it was more about how can we help humans really wake up to what they're capable of and what their true potential is. And so when we start to look at that and that kind of assistance, to me, it makes a lot more sense. Yes, getting rid of weapons also seems benevolent, but look at where we were in history. That would be a very, very difficult thing for everybody to be in agreement on, particularly with an association between the Nordics and the Nazis when they were trying to defeat the Nazis. Basically, the Axis powers and the Allies, both sides have been manipulated.
Right.
So the biggest heroic thing, I think, is just to be a whistleblower and to be able to at least open up the lid and discuss things that the human race has been left in the dark about. Because the more intelligent minds we can bring out there to disseminate and connect dots and shine light on it, the better off we are. And I think that's been the most damaging thing. So, yeah, these different power...
I see this, very much in the YouTube communities, right, where, like let's say 3 years ago I was a fundamentalist Christian and I was coming at this from a very, very Bible perspective, right? But over time, I start to change my views because I learn more information, right? And as I learn more information, my perspective changes, and that's happening to a lot of people who are on all different timelines of their development right now, right? But what I'm starting to see is a convergence. There's a couple of things that are starting to come to the fore. One is we're eternal, infinite beings. Like this one is coming through clearly right now to me and to many people that I talk to, right? That we have been manipulated by outside, not so benevolent influences for a long period of time. That right now the world control structure is primarily made up of these not so benevolent beings right now. Would you care to comment?
It's absolutely true. And that's the thing when we're presented with anything, is that really, the truth? Lies and deception have been why people have stayed so stuck in giving power to these individuals, because we're being given a false history and false promises and a false perspective about, what's really going on. I mean, the fact that there is geoengineering and that our skies have been sprayed, and that's not really being addressed. We're just in this sort of climate change battle, but we're not looking at the technologies that are behind this. We're not looking at these anomalies that we should be demanding answers about. It's still swept under the carpet as conspiracy theory, while there's groups of individuals that seem to care for the environment fighting for something without really lifting up the carpet to see what's underneath. Mm-hmm. And we can't heal as adults or as humans if we don't look at the root of where that core wound came from. Mm-hmm. And that's why the study of galactic history and these wars and the different things that have changed us over the course of time and modified us, and the different beings that are involved in playing a hand in where our future is taking us and where the timelines are going, has been incredibly fascinating to me, because what sort of the foundational thing for me is exactly what you said, just what our potential is, what we're truly made of, what has been taken away from us and handed to us in a different form. Because the thing is, there are good technologies that can help us, but for the most part, these are all very archonic type technologies. Like AI is an imitation technology that gives it back to humanity in a distorted version, giving that false illusion that this is actually going to help advance us. But in actual fact, it's taken something that we innately have within us and is using it to convince us that this could possibly advance us, as they create all these disasters so that we're in survival and desperation to seek those solutions when we are the solution, and we have to recognize that we're the advanced technology here.
Doesn't that remind you of Atlantis, though? The whole idea of Atlantis, when I think about Atlantis, that's what I think happened to that culture, was that they were twisted and deceived into taking drastic actions that then ultimately ended up in their demise. Isn't that what happened in Atlantis, in your opinion? Your sound is off. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, sorry about the shadows here. Yeah, absolutely. And so, we all have these kind of memories. We have memories of exploding planets, but our memories have turned into amnesia. And so our memories of these traumatic things are no longer accessible. And so it's very easy to buy into whatever narrative based on whatever political side we choose, based on, maybe our status, our finances, our morals. And we're not getting down to sorry about the lighting here and fixing it. See, magic.
Ooh, you have a production crew there. How impressive.
Correct. Hello, husband. But yeah, so, yeah. And all these different digressions and wars and things that have taken place have made it very easy to, wake up in this, different human experience and be completely cut off. And about 5,500 years ago was the final war. The Samaria, Egypt invasion was the final thing that really shifted us out of the ability to hold any galactic memories. And our scrambled fire codes has been our junk DNA. We're taught in school that it's junk, it's useless. And the whole educational system has been promoting this lack of awareness about this stuff that we could actually heal if we could switch the lights on. Because we can heal those ancient wars. We hold the debris and the catastrophe in our own DNA by not being able to even access it, which is like it's like
a walking around with a bomb or poison in your pocket or something that you don't even know is there, kind of. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
It's almost like too much to look at, because then we have to understand it, but it's healed with sacred union. It's healed with integration of polarity. It's healed with love, and it connects to the earth grid. It connects to the multidimensional cosmos. And so it's actually a really beautiful discovery. But when we see the way we all relate to each other as humans, we all carry important codes for each other to switch those dormant strains on. But these wars have taught us to pit, these wars have taught us to not get along, and basically the real agenda and the real reason behind a lot of these ET government treaties is to keep us conquered and divided, and to use the byproduct of us not being in our power as a food source, harvesting it for their own means. So it's just parasitic, which happens in our physical reality when things are in imbalance. We attract germs, rats, parasites when we don't clean our mess up. So with this junk DNA and with our lack of awareness, we are a breeding ground to these entities because we're not functioning in our fullness and something else is running the show. And that creates a timeline that's artificial. When we can really awaken what is dormant, then we gain a strong holding. We anchor ourselves to, organic ascension, because the body will begin to follow and begin to upgrade and heal.
That's an interesting thought. I just want to lay this on you because when I started my channel, it was about cataclysm. It was about doom. It was about Planet X. It was about things like that, right? And, and then I expanded out into the conspiracy world and things like that from that point. But the people that listen to this stuff, I've watched them now, and I look at them with a different perspective, because what you're saying is maybe this is a group that actually is confronting and dealing with some of this collective memory of cataclysm, of war, of all these things that they've had us repress and forget. Because I always say that we're a species with amnesia. And in the question is, I ask all the time of all of my religious scientific friends, as I'll say, Homo sapiens, we know for a fact, based on just the archaeological evidence, that we've been here at least 250,000 years. What happened to the other 249,500 years? Because all we can remember is 5,000 years of our history. So right there, that should give us a hint, right? And you're saying that was done on purpose to create this kind of fermenting storm within the human species so that it can be fed on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. There's definitely agendas that, seek to do that. And then there's, more benevolent ones that, the thing is, when we deal with entities, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, interdimensionals, these are all aspects of our multidimensional nature. These are all frequency bands of energy that connect with something that we actually hold, we just forgot. And it's now just a scrambled bunch of junk. And then we, overwhelm ourselves with the whole concept of ufology and, oh my gosh, there's extraterrestrials and they're trying to control us. And we're not seeing things through the lens of, alchemy or transformation or awakening or switching it back on or discovering the fact that we're connected to all of it. Our DNA is broken up into harmonic universes from what I've, researched. And every harmonic universe holds different stories of our galactic history, like the Orion Wars, the Lyran Wars, the explosion of Tiamat, Maldek, and how Nibiru and this Marduk energy has been sort of involved in these, kind of catastrophes that have become almost a part of the planetary system, is the so-called 12th planet, that scientists haven't even really been able to track or find. So how does that end up in our awarenesses? Well, to me, it's part of the reversal Merkaba manipulations and the manipulation of sacred geometries in a way to keep this scrambledness alive, because people are like, oh, the gods have returned. It's like, well, what about waking up to the fact that we hold energies that don't make us lowly and in need of worship, which some, kind of count on, but then there's other entities in those pantheons that are really looking to help us understand the more positive timeline, organic timeline, that would be considered like guardian groups that are more into helping us to activate and remember who we are, versus taking advantage of our amnesia or taking advantage of the fact that we sank into this lower density and we needed to go through these rounds of incarnation in order to learn the right use of power. And so instead of being guardians, a lot of them became, entities that wanted to feed on it because they were too compromised. They either joined in the fallen groups, which compromised their DNA on purpose to put a big net around this planet so that we wouldn't be able to bust through it, and they'd be kind of like policing it and keeping us under, psychically attacking us anytime we start to move beyond the barrier of the seventh chakra into the galactic. But then there's ones that are working on the timelines and working on the reconstruction of the bridge between this density and ones that are beyond it, which is what ascension is. But we're doing that energy work too. Nobody's going to do it for us. But it's also what lifting the lid of Saturn is like. You know, we've been dealing with Saturn, this control system, but when we, you know, see what's going on astrologically, there's a big alchemical process taking place with Saturn that's going to help us to, you know, open up more. And that's why everything's amping up big time. We got some major plutonic things going on, and we're seeing it with the California fires and this amping up of the whole fire elements, some manipulated and some necessary for a purging and renewal and kind of like rising like the phoenix. And so, but that's like a whole nother story, so we don't have to go there. But yeah, so we externalize everything. We externalize everything to the point where we feel like we're at the mercy of whatever is going to come down the pike as far as, you know, what our future holds. But if we could step back and recognize that the war is won within ourselves, and that we have to initiate into these, you know, energies through whatever life is throwing at us, that is our teacher. There's nobody that needs to, you know, stay forever compromised, because the power of spirit, and I know, you know, the power of the 0 point unified field can pretty much heal anything. That's why when we look at, you know, sound healing and certain technologies that utilize sound, color, frequency, can unscramble those codes, because they're all put in a formula that creates digression. But if we, you know, rebuild the puzzle or have a frequency that can repair it, then the energy circulation comes back and the energy blocks are removed, or the genetic damage is restored to its original form. And so nothing has been destroyed. Maybe things have been damaged, but for the most part, like you say, it's mostly amnesia. When we start to open up to the rest of it, I mean, they already have technologies that are regrowing limbs that can bring you back from death in these secret space programs. So if the technology can do it, we can also do it. But there needs to be a bridge between, you know, how we in this form right now can utilize maybe certain advanced technologies to begin to remember our avatar self, so that we can, you know, function without the need for any technology, which these higher races are able to do.
Yeah, like I always say, the higher form beings in the universe that I'm aware of don't need spaceships. I mean, as an example, it's a statement to kind of make a point, right? The point is that once people learn about that, consciousness can move anywhere in the universe it wants to when it's fully engaged, when it's fully activated, in my opinion, Laura. And I don't mean to speak for you. But right now we're contained in a consciousness container called the meat suit. I call it the meat suit. And the meat suit has been designed. I have a feeling, and I'd like you to comment on this. I have a feeling that the meat suit is a type of prison. What do you think of that?
It is a prison as long as it's being controlled and somebody else is infecting our creative channels and energies. I think it's a container that is holding us here until we learn how to break through the false light, or whatever the archonic imitation technologies are trying to do, you know, kind of recycling us. But the thing is, once we have a real awakening, once we really stand in our own truth and authenticity, regardless of what anybody thinks, because that's one of the hardest targets. Oh, what will my parents say? What will my friends say? What will happen to my bank account if I step away from this horrible job that's not doing anything good for humanity? I mean, we got to look at all the places where we resist our own growth because of very sort of superficial things. But to the person, it actually creates pain. It's like the scariest thing for them to take that leap. So in a way, that's what enslaves us, is our unwillingness to just free ourselves and liberate ourselves. You know, it's like we can get out of any bad or toxic relationship by breaking up and moving on and knowing that there's so much better for us. Mm-hmm. And here we are with a system that is no different than having a terrible partner. It's abusive, it's deceptive, it does terrible things behind your back, and it lies. Well,
I mean, there's a lot of people talking about relationship narcissism in the internet world these days. I think you probably noted it. And I made the connection just a few days ago, because I like to listen to a lot of it too. Psychology, interesting stuff, right? And I come to realize that we basically live with if you think about government as an example, as one example, it's like the most narcissistic spouse you could ever have. right?
That's how I kind of look at it. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
It's like narcissism is everywhere we look, and I think part of the reason why it's bubbling up in our interpersonal relationships, as above, so below, kind of thing, where it's actually metaphoric of a larger thing that's happening, which is we're getting free of the narcissist spiritually, the global narcissist, galactic narcissist, if you will, just like we are in our individual lives. And I think a lot of people probably agree with that. So let's just step back for a second right now. Why does it seem like all of this is happening right now? Or is that just the perspective of my lifetime here? Because I'm 55 years old, I'm seeing this stuff happen, and it's new to me, and it's new to a lot of people I talk to. Why does it seem like this time and space right now, all this stuff is happening, or is it just my perspective?
Well, it is. This is a very significant window. The Mayans understood it. A lot of advanced cultures had a lot of prophecies connected to this window. And there's been a lot of doomsday prophecies and, Hollywood and media leveraging that by putting a lot of weird pictures in our space about where we're heading, apocalyptic type stuff. So we see
like 2012, etc. Those movies, things
right.
like that.
And we are seeing, apocalyptic things that take place in different regions, like we're seeing, in California, all over the world, protests. I mean, the list is long. Fires in the Amazon also, and just
riots, everything.
Yeah, so anybody that's waking up to that's going to feel apocalyptic. But at the same time, there is no true death. We can always rise. We can always maintain this cycle of alchemical change within this own physical vessel. Letting go of attachments is the hardest part. But if we can move to the next level, recreate, rebuild, and keep on going, and turn the weapons against us into a tool for our own growth and healing, which makes it impossible for them to be able to defeat us if we can put a positive spin on these attacks, even though it doesn't mean that it's okay. It doesn't excuse it, but that's part of the perspective of, alchemy. And basically, the planetary body is in alignment with the galactic core. The sun started to move through the 13th sign, which represents the healing of, humanity, the reconnection to the mother. 5,500 years ago, the aqua ray energy that it was grounded as a core vibration in the planet was not able to be here anymore. Mm-hmm. So this is why nature is so targeted and weaponized, and there's been so many catastrophes and cataclysms. It's to not only throw off the balance of the masculine and feminine, but it's also to leverage a lot of these exploded planets and a lot of the catastrophes on Earth to put everything in a reversal spin, which is the whole idea of the Baphomet and the reversal energies connected to the mother, and how religion has put something different in front of us that does have, decent values and things to strive for, which is why anybody like, I'm sure yourself, had an affinity with it. But then there's a dark underbelly because there's something.
I was always a weirdo, even in Christian, even as a committed Christian in my Christian circles, I was always a weirdo, just so you know.
Yeah, I could totally get that. So it causes, it's like, okay, well, that worked for so long, just like people go to college for or in some kind of institution. But if they keep going, if they keep searching, they might pop out the other end and say, oh, wait a second. I'm still that spiritual being. I just see a lot more than I did when I was there. And you continue to grow, and maybe some of the others didn't want to. They wanted to stay stuck in that structure. So I think the enslavement is a state of mind. Mind control enslaves us. We did venture off on the path of the tree of knowledge, and I talk about this kind of a lot. So I don't want to be redundant, but I know this is a new audience. These models, the tree of knowledge and tree of life, is our DNA. So tree of knowledge that went into duality, that got dumbed down, that caused amnesia, put us on a path of understanding these dualities, these polarities. But it got targeted with mind control. So we look outside of ourselves and instead of gaining the self-knowledge to rebuild our DNA back to the tree of life, where we have a root system and an openness to spirit, which will unenslave us, which will help this meat suit, blossom into so much more. Maybe not in this incarnation, maybe so. But eventually it'll begin to advance itself to the point of being in the crystalline, vibration, the silicate matrix, which is why it's really good to take like silica. But to go back to what you were saying, I went off back to the original thing that you said, but get me back on track here.
No, I was just listening and enjoying what you were saying. No, what I was going with this is, in fact, let me just take it in a different direction. So where do you think we stand right now in the game? Let's call it the game or the mass chessboard or however you want to put it. Where do we stand right now? Where do you think we stand? And I won't hold you to it. You might change in a week. I get that, but go ahead.
Well, that's the important thing when it comes to this kind of information. We have to stay flexible, because that's another thing that can enslave us when we have, fixed beliefs and views to the point where we But okay.
Time out. Let me make a point. Let me make a point because we're going through a big thing in my community right now about this, right? Because I'm making some really bold statements, and some of the other people that are working with us. And what Laura just said is key. You have to maintain flexibility and resist dogma, because that is another way that you can get cemented into a place where you might not want to be. Go ahead, Laura.
Right. And our body tells us, I mean, what is pain? I know pain, there's a lot of different reasons behind it, but that to me is key to understand, because it's wanting to get our attention to help us to break whatever it is that we're holding to. And it might be a trauma that we are not ready to release. It might be a physical ailment. It might be, an illness. And that's really what we're all facing, pain on some level. And that pain is here to be opened up and understood to get to the root, issue. And we're all born into a wound on some level. The planetary body's wounded. Creation is a gaping wound that I see. It's a free will universe. The misuse of power has created a huge injury, and we all carry a piece of that greater injury. In our own personal life, we live out a micro version of it with a storyline that we very much attach ourselves to. But it's the thing that we're here to work out and solve and heal and transform. But it almost feels like there's not a whole lot of time in the day, because we have to put a roof over our head. We have to make money. We have to feed ourselves. And so the inner work and the inner processing is something that we don't have a lot of time to give attention to. And we
that by design too, though, Laura? I mean,
exactly. I was just going to say.
Go ahead.
And that's where we are right now, is at a crossroads of, are we going to give ourselves the sacred space to work through some of this stuff, to prioritize our partnerships, to prioritize our self-love, to get to know ourselves better based on the things that we feel we're missing, the things we're longing for, the things that make us angry and depressed. So instead of judging those things about ourselves, we can get to know it and hear the messages, because nothing is going to guide us greater than that, because those are all elementals: water, earth, fire, air. The air quality is the mind control, and we see the outer weaponry that's trying to keep that alive in our own system. So we have to be willing to push the envelope to see the timeline shift. And so we just had a new moon in Scorpio, and Scorpio in Mercury is about to go retrograde at the end of the month around Halloween time. And there's an opposition with Uranus, which creates a lot of shock and upheaval. And we're seeing this in California. I keep bringing that up because it's just so there right now. And some very difficult aspects from Saturn, and some very difficult aspects between Mars and Pluto. So Saturn's going to create constriction, and then the Pluto-Mars square is going to create the need to release to the point where it could become very violent and volatile in our personal world, in the larger picture. And so we need to kind of be very gentle how we steer this ship through some really, really crazy terrain for some time. And then as we enter January 2020, Saturn and Pluto are going to be much more next to each other in conjunction, but Jupiter and Uranus are going to cast their rays. And that's a lot of light energy. That connects us to truth, the unified field, the 0 point unified field. And so they're ramping everything up, because that is the scariest time in regards to their agendas. If we can reach that time period and really benefit from it and stand in alignment to it, we're going to really secure ourselves even more so on this organic ascension, which is basically the blossoming of our truth, who we really are, what we're really made of. It's not needing to be this externalized projection that throws people off. It's really just reclaiming our junk DNA and finding a way to switch on the rest of who we truly are. So if we can just brace ourselves, if we can just get through this rocky period, whatever comes, goes, whatever we need to, do in the face of certain catastrophes or events that they're going to throw at us in order to throw us off balance and throw us out of our own core center, to put our attention on the propaganda, the doom, gloom, this is what it means, this is where we're heading, and really focus on our own creative intent and our own creative power to dream a future that is beneficial for ourselves and the whole of humanity on this planet. And if we can harness these forces right now without letting these outer attacks completely annihilate our faith in ourselves, then we're in really good shape. We're a couple months away from it. So this is why the swords are being extra thrown, and there's an amping up of the chaoticness. And as that happens, we're dealing with the war of dark and light. So the best thing that we can do is take both, integrate it, not overly polarize ourselves, find some level of balance, get a strong creative intent, and commit and devote to it. Because we're going to see some really good results soon. But we're also potentially going to see a bifurcation, where, you know, people who have really, really lost themselves are subject to more of the BS. And the lines are going to split to the point where it's going to be very hard to jump over to the other one when the gap starts to really grow. And it doesn't have to be a visual thing. It's just something that we can recognize in our own consciousness. We have the ability to co-create this, or somebody's going to create it for us. And we're making some pivotal choices in our own individual worlds. And when we make the right choice for ourselves in our individual world, we can hopefully inspire others to join in, and we can become a more united front. And that is exactly what they don't want. And so chaos, survival, you know, having our livelihoods threatened, is a way to really put us in a survival chakra disconnected because of that fear.
Well, that's what they've been doing to me, Laura. Man, I'll tell you straight up, and people all around me have been just being slammed on the survival front, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I moved so many times in my life. I lived out of a vehicle for more than a decade. I mean, I've lost so much along the way, and I still mourn some of those things that I've lost. Whether it's, yeah, we all lose loved ones. We've all gone through a lot of crap. Mm-hmm. And in a way, I got so, you know, used to it that I ended up, you know, moving with just a few bags instead of like having to get a moving truck, because I was so used to having nothing that it was easy for me to just land in the next location. So in a way, I got really used to sort of the disaster preparedness without feeling the total loss and lack, because I'd spent so many years processing that and mourning from it, that it's like, okay, you know, I can see what I need to do now in the face of that. I have to find inner security. I have to be resourceful. I have to be able to recreate in the face of something, tearing something down. And I wouldn't say that I'm a pro at it. I still go into
and I would say that the community itself and the people that I count as friends and and I hate using the word conspiratorium because that it implies a negative thing, but you know what I mean when I say that. There are people across the board that are saying the same thing. It's like, it's almost like we were prepared for this moment where a lot of us lost everything. I lost everything. And to your point, it's like, I'm lighter. I feel like I can move to the next spot if I need to quickly, efficiently, right? But let's go back to something that you were talking about, and I refer to this as the lowest unified velocity. You refer to it as 0 point, I think. Talk to us a little bit about what 0 point is.
Well, to me, it's where the galactic cores of Andromeda and Milky Way become one again, because we became a fallen galaxy. And it's always been there, but we're seeing something happening on a much larger level that actually makes it easy to connect with it in ways that we haven't been able to before. And to me, it is where unity is in a space of, like, I wouldn't say neutrality where there's numbness, but neutrality where it's just pure love, frequency, unconditional love, and wisdom and power. And it's the true direct connect to spirit that we're all needing, instead of having the manipulative, sort of archonic or Anunnaki, lower creator God kind of mentality that makes us feel like we're going to be punished or we're going to be judged. I mean, we can only really judge ourselves. So to me, it's the balance. It's where we can integrate polarity and come into like true balance, and understand that, you know, if we create adversity in our life, it's really there to wake us up and help us to correct things, help us to grow.
Right.
And so when we can stay in that direct connect and feel that flow, it keeps us in this vibration of like divine innocence, where we can fall down, get back up again. We're not too attached to anything. We're not judging ourselves as being this or that. We're not allowing ourselves to be programmed about what it means to become an adult and choose your political party and, you know, see if you can make a lot of money and prove yourself to the world that you're just amazing, you know, or you suck and you're a loser, right? So that is not in the 0 point unified field. The 0 point to me is just a direct connect with spirit that really shields us, protects us, grounds us, and gives us the true sense of what the breath of life is all about. What animates matter? What is the consciousness of this planet? Because the core of this planet, the core of this earth, is that 13th gate that we were talking about earlier, that is connected to the 13th sign, and that actually connects us to the 0 point and the neutron window that helps us to connect to Andromeda Galaxy, which is now one with the galactic core that holds these other galactic chakras that help to switch on our dormant DNA and bring us back into a much, greater physical embodiment. So we're not going to move that quickly towards it, but as long as our consciousness can get there first, the physical has no choice to respond. We wouldn't want our physical to be too overwhelmed too quick, but if we can just link our consciousness to it, the consciousness will move through the gates. Whatever has to happen to the meat suit will happen to the meat suit, but we don't want to be manipulated out of the fear of losing the meat suit to the point where our consciousness is not connected to the 0 point anymore. And so to me, when you look at the tarot, it's the Fool, the 0 card. And so it just skips along, and it's just like, woo-hoo-hoo, kind of happy-go-lucky. It's just like things could be blowing up around you, but you have this direct connect, and you can feel just the presence of your higher self. And it's not just a philosophy. It's not just something that you kind of listen to every once in a while. It's a way of life. It's in your root. It's in your being, and you walk it, and it's your true existence. And to me, that's what's the most organic thing. This money system is a total falsity. But we're dealing with like huge populations of people, and we are at this stage of the game. But if we can just get on track, we can enjoy this adventure with a greater view of where it's all taking us, instead of thinking that, it's up to the president, it's up to, voting this person in office, or we need to do that, we just have to be in the creative flow, because we're incredibly powerful. That is the one thing that's been robbed from us more than anything. And that theft has broken people's hearts. And so in that pain, the addiction matrix and these lower entities are like, okay, well, take this product, buy this, do that, drink that, smoke this, and you won't feel this theft. This will fill that void. That's why it's so hard for people, because those attachments almost like supplement for that theft that happened thousands of years ago, that is very ingrained in who we are. And it's passed on multi-generationally, and it ends up being, DNA damage very often. So this is a big time of clearing, and we just have to jump on board. It's very organic. It's happening on a cosmic and earthly level. And so if we can just say, hey, I'm up for it, we'll see a lot of changes happen, a lot that's going to want to purge and come to the surface that might not be comfortable. But, we're unconditionally loved. This planetary body wouldn't have been created the way it was created, and what intent it holds, if we didn't have an unconditionally loving source energy that totally has our back. And we have been duped right and left so that we do not connect into it. And so the outer thing that we're seeing is very much about the health of the collective right now. Where are we on this journey? Mm-hmm. We have not purified our inner elements. We have not gotten our free thinking back. And so what we're seeing in the outer world is pushing us to the edge to be able to get back to the self and say, what do I need to do to clear this vessel, to clear these elements, and to connect into the direct connect? Because the ether is available now. Those sacred geometries like the dodecahedron that was purposely manipulated to keep us in lockdown, enslaved, so that we wouldn't be able to connect with the ether. As of 2009, 2010, that opened up. When the sun started to move through the 13th sign, that's actually ruled by the ether. It changed everything. It's been healing the earth grids. There's grid workers all over the world, been opening up stargates that have, been put in reversals to digress the human race. This is what's available, and it's going to clear us from the inside out. And it's not going to take a lot of strategy or like having to go out of our way to figure it out. It's simply a commitment. And then the synchronicities become more obvious. Yes. And we make better choices for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as what we put in our bodies and stuff.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just getting excited.
Oh, no, please do. Totally over just blah, blah.
Yeah, no, because I was just resonating with what you were saying, because this is exactly what my experience looks like lately. But tell us how it looks for you to connect to the 0 point. What does that look like for you personally when you connect to the 0 point or to the lowest unified velocity?
It's just authenticity, I think when we answer to something outside of us, there's two ways we can answer to it. One is because we're being controlled, and the other is because we have respect and we're being polite and we're being considerate. That's different. Being controlled, having something infect your creative energy to the point where you're even fearing the timeline you're on, or you think there might be a doom and gloom, then when I start to notice myself feeling that, I'm like, wait a second, that's not my creative self. That's not my true self. I don't find that it bothers me that much, and it hasn't for years. That's why I feel more comfortable as a speaker, because I have so much confidence in the human race. I have no fear about our future at all, as far as what's available and what's real and what's right under our feet, right under our toes. And I don't know. It's a connection to the earth. It's a connection to spirit. It's, to me, I don't want to say like.
You meditate? Do you
I used to a lot. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I'm a work in progress, right? So I can be aligned and then fall to the wayside a little bit, go back into some old patterns, correct myself. And I think we all do that. And we don't realize that all of us are connected to the 0 point. I'm no more connected than anybody else. I mean, I put a lot of effort and work into staying, in this mission and staying aligned and doing the best I can with it and giving a voice to it so that it's more palpable. But to me, it's noticing the birds, it's noticing the trees, it's noticing the leaves, the water, the earth, the vibration of the earth, the connection there, what it's showing me, what it's teaching me. I don't care if it's a predator, I don't care if it's a rattlesnake or a golden eagle. It's just, to me, we are constantly being communicated with, and we're in relationship to everything. So to me, it's about standing up and being a good partner to creation. How can I, make this world a better place? How can, it's like when you go camping, you don't want to trash the place and pollute it. You want to leave it better than how you found it. So to me, it's reverence, it's guardianship, and it's being in communion with the sacred energies of life, sexual energy, relationships, partnerships, self-love. That's the harder one for me. Like, okay, take good care of yourself, stay away from, but if I do, I forgive myself and I laugh it off. If
right. But this is not to condemn you if you make a mistake. This is the thing I'm learning now. It's
that's
like
the 0 point. You can fall down, get back up again. We're little kids.
That 0 point that allows me to do that spirit energy that you're talking about. Yeah. It's saying, look, brush yourself off, start a new day. Let's go.
Yeah. And we can self-correct. I mean, I have no issue saying I'm sorry. I have no issue it's just, I think it comes with a bit of humility, but also passion and purpose to just know that, you're striving for something and you want to bring everybody along. And it's not about them agreeing with you. It's not about them thinking exactly the same way. It's about, playing your own instrument and tuning into everybody else, encouraging them to tune their instrument up so we can play some beautiful music together. Because really the higher octaves of the planetary energies are like music. The shadow side of the planets keep us in this, craziness, but those are connected to our organs and our energy meridians. And, we're a stargate. So if we're identifying with the shadow side of things, if we're in our negative ego, that makes it easy, then we're not really connected, but we're in a growth period to find that connection. So even if somebody is like way off and they're completely locked in that kind of stuff, that's an important part of their journey. Because eventually, whether they're laying in the hospital bed or whether they're, nursing an injury, which we've all been there, done that, it allows us to step away from reality for a little while and question it. And that's why a lot of people say, man, that injury or that illness saved my life. It woke me up.
Oh, I know a lot of people that are spinning with us right now, Laura, in this dialogue that we're having here today. A lot of them are older, disabled people that had an accident or had some kind of early retirement or whatever. I noticed that a lot of the people that are in this mode right now are people that did get that space.
And so we got to drop the whole good fortune, bad fortune, and just look at it like, we're vulnerable as humans to injury, accident. I mean, Chiron is a wound that comes from outside of us. It injures us. And it can put a person in a victim mentality. But when we begin to turn it into knowledge and we can begin to poke a hole into something vaster and more informative coming from, the spirit realms, then we don't limit ourselves to just looking at ourselves through the lens of this human experience in this 3D. And so when we get to step back, I mean, wherever we're at in life, at any moment we can tap into something much greater. Because true success isn't being the most perfect and healthy person or having, your whole physical existence in perfect order. Maybe that's a goal, but the real purpose or the real essence of why I feel we're here is for soul development and to, find, a real heart and just those higher principles of love, wisdom, compassion, and also boundaries. Where do you need boundaries? Because the physical body is going to tell us what we need. And that to me is the law. Our physical body is much more the law. But we're asked to do things out of being of service that could put us in a very vulnerable position. But we have to understand, what is the intention behind why we chose to do that? That is what counts at the end of the day. All the people who might question, why did I go off and fight that war? Regardless of what gender, I mean, we have a vast history where we've all been there. Some people more recently. It's the heart intention that matters. Yes, we've been fooled, but that doesn't prevent us from being ascended eventually. It's the virtue of the heart and our minds and our soul that needs to shine through, and maybe on some level forgive the trickery and deceptions that have used us and our talents and our skills and our good nature and our intention to do what's right and basically used it for their own agendas. We need to let go of that and recognize that those virtues are what live, not those other things. And when we can rise above it, we don't carry the burden of their ignorance and their cruelty and their anti-life agenda. And we're all waking up to it. I mean, who would have thought, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, I'm freaking out on the synchronicity of just even this conversation and what's going on. And synchronicity is a kind of an interesting thing. So I guess in summary, you see us kind of moving towards this focus on self-healing, focus on your inner self, balancing yourself, balancing the dark and the light, internal work, so that we can be positioned for this alignment that's coming up, so that we can take the most advantage of this, what call it a direct current from God, almost, I guess you could almost say, right?
Yeah, without the filter, without the veil, without the frequency fences in our DNA that are all kind of blowing away. But there's always something that wants us to hold the energetic imprint and distortion through something coming through the media, through the things that they're going to visually create to put us in panic. And it's obvious. I mean, we can't just not be panicked. We can't not feel it. I mean, I can't imagine what a lot of people are going through all over the world with, so much disruption. But, we can do something about it in the moment with the way we perceive it. And the thing is, imbalance is what keeps these dark entities in control. Giving our power away keeps these dark entities in control. So what we have to do is say, you know what? I release myself of all attachments. I trust and I'm open to what's coming through, because it might take me somewhere far greater, and it might actually, help to do like a massive reset. And it also might make you pissed off enough to stand up for the bullshit that you're seeing, so that you can be a voice of change. Because it'll anger us into passion and action, or it'll inspire us to let go and move on to something else. Doesn't mean it's better visually or as a human in their lifestyle, especially if your house is just burned down. But the cultivation of these experiences within the soul transcend the material. And if we can just keep our focus on that, there's a lot of forces of divinity that are connected to our higher self, that connect to the unified field, or whatever you want to call it, and will bring some real beauty. And sometimes it's just a person that you meet while you're just hanging out at the campground. I mean, like you, I've lost so much, and when I just let go, I saw the miracle of like the new world that was opening up to me. Mm-hmm. And when I was in poverty consciousness or victim consciousness, I attracted a lot of dark forces to me. When I was at peace and I just accepted the reality, even if I was targeted, even if I was being robbed or manipulated, if I just accepted where I was, then it would start to move away, and I would manifest things like I wouldn't believe. I was like, well, that's kind of like a miracle. I can't believe I just manifested this, because I dropped the attachment to the assault and the weapon. And I'm not saying that people don't go through a process, but yeah, let's just help each other. I mean, the worst thing that I'm seeing is when people attack one another and they're still in their, I mean, you do a video or do something, not you, but I mean.
Oh, yes. Me. Oh, yes, me. Go ahead.
Yeah. And when people are out there doing their best to really be supportive of something positive, maybe they don't do it perfectly. Maybe, there's something about them, not to be in that lower mentality of attack and duality, like recognize like how our creative energy is either feeding a timeline that is negative or positive, because ultimately nobody else can create it for us but ourselves. And our words and our actions create, a feedback loop. And if we can be responsible and in integrity, we can stay connected to something that is going to uplift us to, the world we're destined to experience. And those that aren't ready are going to keep looping in a lot of negative patterns until they get it. But I think, the unconditional love of the universe doesn't leave anybody behind. Nobody will ever be truly abandoned. Only we can walk away. Just like our immune system is always there. We can continue to trash ourselves. We can continue to put bad remedies in our bodies from the pharmaceutical companies, or we can begin to work with, things that will help us to enhance what is already there and help our connection with it, because then it'll heal us. So I almost look at the immune system in a similar way that I see the 0 point energy. It's always there. Only we can abandon it and trash our relationship to it. And that causes us to send out a ripple of energy that can either lower the vibration of the collective or raise it. And every single one of us has a choice in every moment to decide to be a powerful force in this process that we're in. So, but I don't think we're at the mercy of huge numbers of people. But at the same time, I do see the oneness, but I see oneness as diversity and harmony, which I say a lot. Got to harmonize together and allow each other to be.
Well, and harmony implies that we are playing different instruments now, doesn't it? Or singing in different, like, you know, I used to sing in a lot, and you know, when I would be in a quartet, you know, there'd be a bass, there'd be a tenor, there'd be a baritone, right? And we would sing different parts, different octaves, and we were not the same. But when we blended those things together, it was beautiful, man. There's nothing more beautiful than blending with a quartet. Unbelievable,
like that, yeah.
Right?
Well,
it's just weird how powerful that is. Go ahead.
Yes, totally. And so, you know, people should study like music of the spheres. You know, when these very, very different energies that, you know, hold, you know, sort of a dark shadow side that they can manipulate with dark technology to sort of keep in the dark side. Are you there?
I am. I switched over to your website because I'm going to talk about it in a minute.
Yeah, when we just choose to like harmonize, play the best you that you can play, then you're an instrument of something, you know, really divine. Then you invite other people to say, hey, I want to play my instrument the best way that I can play it. And I mean, look at the web of life, and I always compare it to the web of life. There are so many insects, 10,000 species or so, so many different levels of the ocean and so many different creatures. And yes, they might have this eating each other kind of thing, but it's a reflection of our soul is what nature is. And it does have the chaos and the order going for it, just because every being, every creature is authentically itself. And so there's no real death, because when an animal, I mean, where does it go? I mean, we're in a greater ecosystem, multidimensionally speaking, and we have been taught to fear death. And I'm not saying like, you know, let's be like animals in nature, but the medicine of nature and what we're seeing there can help us to find some kind of resonance or harmony or balance, you know, in our own soul between, you know, all these different, you know, diverse things. You know, I mean, we could go all into the, where am I going with this kind of thing, which I am, but just because something destroys doesn't mean it doesn't recreate. But we're humans. We have ET genetics. We are from higher dimensional energies. That's why we've been given the responsibility to be guardians, and but also to allow each other our own growths. Hopefully with the agreement that we're just going to treat each other with love and respect, because that to me is the most important. Not convincing somebody to be vegan, not convincing somebody to see it exactly like you, but choosing, you know, love and respect, because, you know, that lifts the veil. That wins the war, is, you know, choosing love and respect, regardless of...
Well, choosing sovereignty and then choosing not to lord over anybody else. How's that?
Exactly. Yes.
How about not being a victim, not being a perpetrator, and not being a savior, and not needing any of the three? How about that?
That's perfect.
You know, those are ideas that I've been playing with. Yeah. Those are the ways I'm kind of boiling it down, Laura. You know what I mean? Hey, by the way, thank you so much for your time tonight. I'm going to let you go here because I know you've got a family and things to do here, but everybody, go to cosmicgaia.org. I'll have the link below for you guys to go check out more about Laura's stuff. She also puts her YouTube videos up in here. You can YouTube her name. You'll come up with 100 videos that you can probably watch of Laura. And I just highly encourage you guys just to kind of tap into what she's talking about and what she's into, and just another member of the tribe, right, guys? So let's make sure we do that. Laura, before we end up, though, I'm just going to give you the floor. So tell us anything you want us to, as a farewell kind of thought.
Well, I just think, you know, you really just wrapped it up with the perfect statement, because that's exactly what I'm, you know, trying to say. I do have a podcast. You can subscribe. I work with people individually to look at their chart, to utilize it as a tool to find that zero energy, to not be looping in negative patternings, to understand how to stand in alignment with universal forces that are going to help you to wake up, and how to release yourself of the binds of Saturn, to enlighten Saturn, to be a part of this flow of energy that, you know, we all have a unique, you know, map to just, you know, give us something to go on that, yeah. CosmicGaia.org, podcasts. I like to really make sure I bring in people that have a lot of great healing tools and modalities.
Yep.
And I guess just a leaving note is, I just really look forward to where we're going to be in not too long. And if you feel that doom, gloom, or it's not possible for you, that's just not true. Just keep doing your best with what's coming at you, and see it from the perspective of, your own higher mind, because Uranus, the planet, connects us to truth. It connects us to our authenticity. So really, setting yourself free is giving yourself permission to be the fullness of all that you are. And it doesn't need to be perfectly enlightened. It doesn't need to be in the greatest of mood and the most positive. But if we can allow ourselves to just face it, process through it, it'll eventually like get us there. But you got to feel it to heal it. Any denial, any judgment of it is only going to, keep us stuck. And so let's just really, encourage one another and inspire one another through, holding hands together a little bit more and being a lot kinder and supportive. So I guess on that note, that's.
Thank you, Laura, and it's been a real pleasure to meet you. I've been looking forward to meeting you, and I hope you'll come back again and talk more. I'd love to have you back again in a short period of time and continue the discussion.
Yeah, I would love that too, and thank you so much for having me.
Right on. Thanks, Laura. Okay, everybody, make sure you go to Cosmic Gaia, and until next time, Steve Olson, WSO, and Laura Eisenhower. Bye-bye.